Hi there, Pitch Perfect vocal students and anyone else that has dropped into the YouTube channel to check up on my tips for effective singing. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Meera Belle and I've been a teacher for quite some time, overseas and here, and I am the owner of Pitch Perfect Vocal Studio. I have a dedicated band of students from all ages, and the motto of my studio is healthy singing at all ages and all stages. Today I'm going to catch up on some of my students, and for those of you who aren't my students, just feel free to pick up on any of this and any of my other videos with technique tips as well. But primarily for my students during lockdown, I don't know if anybody else realises, but I'm in New South Wales and Sydney, and we're in a pretty hard lockdown at the moment. And so lessons are taking place via Zoom, which, as we all know, isn't the easiest medium for singing to take place, and certainly not for teaching. But it is still an effective way to keep pace with your technique and keep pace with your voice. So this is a little video to help motivate my students about the importance of keeping up their technique. It would be very easy, I think, in these circumstances to let all of that go and just sort of think that it's not relevant. And I'm here to say that it's extremely relevant, and in actual fact, if you want to put a positive spin on it, this is a great time for you to check in with your basic technique and maybe place in some habits, some good vocal habits and some good practice habits. So there's a couple of things that I just want to touch off. Number one, remember when you are a singing student, the importance of a routine. I really can't stress this often enough, the importance of a routine. Now, we talk about a warm-up routine, and what do we actually mean by a warm-up? A warm-up per se is not a warm-up. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but we speak all day long. We speak from pretty much the moment that we get up. And so our voices are warm, but they're only warm in the speech inflection range. That's the normal range, the rise and fall of our speaking voice. So when we come to sing, we actually need to elongate our vocal range. We want to make sure that we can warm up our voices right up to the top of our range and also down at the bottom of our range. So we're extending the range of sound, and we're putting all of that together. This is what brings me to my second point, the importance of scales. When we started our Zoom lessons last week, this is something that I tried to touch off on with all of my students. I had a student ask me, why do we do scales? Why are we warming up on scales? What's the value of that? And I mean, that's a really great question. Why are we warming up on scales? Firstly, I'd like you to think of music as a land of blocks, like Legoland. Music is made up of notes. Those notes connect to each other, either in a melodic line or a harmonic line. Our job as singers is to learn how to put those bricks, those notes, together. To understand how to construct anything, we have to understand the materials that we use. And those bricks, those notes, are the materials that we sing. We use them. To understand them, we have to understand the shape of them. We have to understand the colour of them. We have to understand the relationship that they may or may not have to each other, and in a sequence. By far, the simplest thing to do is to sing those notes in a sequence. And in doing so, we link the relationship of those notes to each other in a consecutive way. And that becomes habitual. That becomes a little bit like lifting weights. You know, when we're lifting weights and we're trying to train our muscles, we repeat. We repeat those weights, and then when our muscles are strong enough at that weight, we challenge it a little bit more. And singing scales is a little bit like that. Not only are we learning the relationship of notes among themselves, we're learning them in a sequence, and then we change that sequence up. So we learn other sequences, and they make up the building blocks of melody and harmony, and therefore music. So think of yourself as a Lego creator, and think of the notes as Lego blocks. How do they relate to each other? This brings me to an interesting point about the majority of scales that we sing, which are either up or down or sometimes both in the same sequence, and the fact that they are mainly major scales. We mainly warm up on major scales. We hardly ever warm up on minor scales. And if you don't quite understand what that means, if I go... That's a major scale, that's an octave scale. If I did this, then I would be touching off on all of the half notes that occur in a major scale. All of those little notes, you may see them as the black notes on a piano. They're not always black notes because of the way that the piano keyboard is set out. But it's the half tones between those whole tones. So think of them as cement between the bricks. If we're going back to the analogy of bricks, then we can think of those little half notes as the cement between the bricks. Generally, we sing the bricks. They're the easiest ones to sing in sequence and bring them down. Sometimes we put space between the bricks. So do you see what I mean? When we do that, we are building body memory, again, that bodybuilding analogy. And when we have that body memory, we have an instantaneous recall as to the relationship between notes because we've learned those patterns. So your musical brain is a little bit like a supercomputer or a library. You know, once it knows how something is supposed to go, it files that away so that when you come to sing a piece of music or listen to a piece of music, your brain, your subconscious musical instinct is already picking out all of those musical patterns. And so when it comes to learning a song, if you've done your scales and you've got all of that knowledge stored, then your brain can move to the next level of your musicianship, and that is to sometimes be ahead of the music, guess what kind of pattern is coming up, be able to ascertain what the melodic pattern is likely to be, what the harmonic pattern is likely to be in any given song. This is invaluable for a learning student. So, doing your scales touches off a lot of big pluses. It works your voice from top to bottom. It works it sequentially so that you're understanding the relationship between notes. It gives you excellent body memory for patterns. So when it comes to learning your material, you're a little bit ahead of the pack. I hope that's been a reasonable explanation. If you've got any questions, you can fire them back at me. Meera@meerabelle.com, Meera@meerabelle.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Hope that's given you something to think about today. Go do your scales. See you later.